Hey guys, Cotezi here, also known as Dirty Avocado. As promised, today's video is going to be about shoes. All the injuries and mistakes I made and basically what not to do on a thru hike. Nowadays, I see a lot of videos out there regarding different pieces of gear related to hiking and backpacking and things like that, but not enough videos talking about shoes and how they can really affect your overall hiking and basically determine whether you have a successful thru hike or not. So I figured I'd share with you my journey regarding shoes, where I started off from and where I am now, which will hopefully help you when planning your next hike. So before I get into the actual video, I wanted to share with you a brief history regarding my footwear prior to the PCT. But for those of you who want to jump straight into all the shoes that I wore on the trail, you can check out the description below this video and I'll have a whole list there so you can check it out. But back to the story. So in 2010, I actually fell off my bike while training for a bike tour and fractured my L5 on my spine. Ever since then, I've suffered from pretty bad chronic low back pain during most physical activities and just everyday life. So when I started getting into day hiking and overnight backpacking, the pain would actually get even worse. And at the time, I was wearing your typical ankle length rigid hiking boot. So of course, my feet were also in a lot of pain at the end of each hike. But I loved hiking and just being in the outdoors so much that I kind of dealt with it and didn't really think much of it. Also important to note that up until that point, I'd only really worn and experienced shoes that were pretty narrow and kind of pointy and just tight overall. But yeah, so then fast forward to 2016 when I was preparing for my thru hike of the John Muir Trail, I decided to look more into this shoe situation. And that's actually where I came across trail runners, specifically Altras, and how you could use them for hiking and backpacking, and my mind was pretty much blown. So I ended up hiking the entire trail in Ultra Lone Peaks 3.0 women's size 7.5. So at the time, my current foot size was a size 7. But the specialist recommended to go a little bit higher for a hike because your feet will naturally swell and get bigger as you go. So yeah, overall, the shoes worked out great, especially in comparison to traditional hiking boots. For demonstration purposes, I actually have an Ultra Lone Peak 3.0 in a women's size 7.5. And to sum up its pros, they have a pretty wide toe box, increased breathability, they're super comfortable and like really lightweight. They have a 0 drop, so that means no heel elevation. Your heel and the front of your foot is on the same level, so to kind of encourage natural walking. And then also they have a little gator trap here to avoid rocks from getting inside your shoes. And they also have pretty good traction at the bottom of the shoe. Better traction than I've experienced in a lot of different shoes. So for me, all of these different things basically led to a hiking experience that was involving very minimal knee pain, but most importantly, like minimal to 0 low back pain. And for me, that was really huge. And I overall just like had this epiphany that narrow, pointy shoes are not natural, and having very minimal heel support and being as close to the ground as possible when walking might just be the key to like long-term success when hiking a long-distance trail. So now when preparing for my 2017 Pacific Crest Trail thru hike, it was a no-brainer that I was going to use the Ultras, and I actually started out hiking with the same pair that I finished the John Muir Trail with, which had only had over 200 miles in them. So I figured I'd keep an eye on them, and also just having them already be worn in and kind of avoiding that breaking period would minimize the amount of blisters that I would get. So all that turned out to be true. However, I still experienced a lot of foot soreness and swelling in the desert. And looking back now, it probably was because I started doing 20-mile days right off the bat and actually didn't take my first 0 until mile 175 in Idlewild. Before the PCT, I made like a quick little kind of schedule for myself where I was going to take a 0 on the 3rd day and then on the 6th day, and like that all just kind of went out the window. That probably was my first mistake that I made on the PCT, is just kind of going gung-ho about it, not taking it slow, and not taking a zero until like after the first week of being on trail. To be honest, my reasoning for not taking zeros the way that I had planned originally was because I didn't want to lose trail family that I had formed kind of that first week, and also just like the overall adrenaline and endorphins and the hiker's high that you experience when you're out on the trail can really alter the way that you perceive pain. It just felt really good to be hiking all day from sunrise to sunset. It was kind of like clockwork. Before you knew it though, my bubble burst and I had my first dose of reality at around mile 250 of the PCT entering Big Bear Lake in California. I basically started experiencing a weird pain in the back of my left Achilles tendon. It was like this bump, probably fluid filled, so that every time it would rub up against the back of my shoe, it would just create this acute pain, making it almost impossible to walk. That's when I knew right there that I'd probably outgrown the shoes, which was to be expected at that mileage. They always say you want to change your shoes out after like 500 miles. And that's because not only does the sole of the shoe wear out, but also your foot literally grows. So I was kind of freaking out because I didn't have a lineup of shoes waiting for me already at home, because I decided before the PCT that I wasn't gonna have shoes waiting for me and I would just kind of figure it out as I went. So I just decided to take a few zeros until the foot and the weird bump behind my Achilles tendon would stabilize. So I did that and everything was going fine actually until the last 6 miles getting into the next town, which is when the pain started to flare up again. And in desperation, I just like took my shoes off and started walking barefoot, because that was literally less painful than having the shoe rub up against that weird bump in the back of my heel. And it was a terrible idea because I could feel every single little rock and sharp thing on the trail, and I was kind of trying to get there in a rush because I wanted to so it was like a nightmare pretty much, because it's not like you could just stop, you kind of have to keep pushing through. But I made it into town alive, just extremely sore. My feet were just huge just from the impact of the ground and just all of that. And now we're at mile 350-ish total on the PCT. I was obviously done with those shoes and realized that I could get an Uber to a local REI. Literally my only mission at that point was to find a pair of shoes that caused me the least amount of pain and rubbing in the back of my heel. So the only shoe that did that was this pair. This is a MERRELL Pace Glove 3. And this is actually a women's size 8, so half a size larger than the Ultras that I had just hiked with. So as you can see, like the back right here is so flexible and soft. I actually ended up hiking in these shoes all the way to Lake Isabella, which is mile 650 of the PCT. So basically another 300 miles with these shoes. And overall, the shoes were great, as far as no injuries or like major foot issues. But my feet were really sore at the end of each day because of how minimal the shoes are. They do have a pretty firm, durable outsole. It's just like very thin. So my feet felt everything on the ground. But on the upside to this, it kind of forced me to be a little bit more conscious of my feet and the way that I walked. So for example, heel striking. With the Ultras, because you have so much cushion at the bottom of the shoe, even though it's a zero drop shoe, it's easy to heel strike and not really feel any immediate pain, which kind of allows you to continue doing that bad behavior. Versus the MERRELLs, if you heel strike, you immediately feel the pain and that impact, that your body immediately corrects itself and just encourages more long-term proper form. But yeah, the downside was that the shoes were so minimal and like, you know, I never really had an extremely long amount of experience hiking in such minimal shoes before in the past. So my feet were pretty beat up at the end of each day, really swollen naturally. And also important to note that I never really stopped averaging 20 miles each day ever since that first week. Even with all these foot issues I was having, and even with the fact that I was hiking in a really completely minimal shoes. So that was another mistake. They just keep adding up. So yeah, if you've been watching up until this point, thank you very much. I applaud you for bearing with me in this really long story. But I ended up getting to Lake Isabella, which is mile 650 on the PCT. Basically hiked 300 miles with those MERRELLs. And that's when I had my new shoes waiting for me. And that shoe was actually an Altra Lone Peak 3.0, but in a men's size 7 this time. So I've already mentioned all the pros about the shoe, but the reasoning for getting the men's size is because the men's size runs 1.5 sizes larger than the women's. So a men's 7 is technically a women's 8.5, which is basically one full size bigger than the women's Altra shoe I started out the trail with. And also the men's shoe is a little bit wider than the women's shoe. So for me, wider was always better. I was actually really glad to be back in Ultras just for the sake of my poor sore feet. I got into the shoes and it was like an immediate walking on a cloud feeling. I had also missed the roominess that comes with an Altra shoe. The MERRELLs aren't near as wide. Okay, so as far as hiking with those shoes, they got me through the Sierras just fine. Important to note though that the year that I hiked the PCT, the Sierra had like 200% above snowfall levels, which was record breaking or something. There was hardly ever any trail throughout the entire Sierra section. There was a lot of river fords that we had to do. Just overall, really kind of slow going. But on the upside, this kind of helped because it meant that I never really averaged more than 15 miles a day-ish, with a couple 20s in there. But most importantly, the icy alpine waters that like you were constantly going through, I think just helped your feet recover on a daily basis, especially compared to the hot desert. So yeah, once we were out of the Sierra, it was a combination of finally having smooth, visible trail again, with our packs being lighter without having to have all that Sierra gear anymore, and just overall feeling really strong. That made me want to pick up my miles again. So I'm basically now at the beginning of the NorCal section of the PCT, and that's when I decided to start pumping out 30-mile days, back to back, with few to no 0 days throughout the whole stretch. And then that's where, somewhere in NorCal, I started experiencing this deep, achy stiffness in the back of my right heel now. And it was lower than the Achilles tendon. It was like in the bony part behind the heel. It would be worst in the mornings, especially when we had a really steep long climb right off the bat. It would kind of warm up throughout the day, get better at night, and then kind of start all over again in the morning, and so on and so forth. And I tried a lot of massaging like the direct area, but sometimes it would be too tender. I tried massaging the calf muscle and stretching it, but sometimes it would actually just hurt too much to even stretch, because it would kind of stretch the heel and Achilles, and that part would really hurt. But overall, this kind of pain was kind of manageable. Like, I could hike through it. It was just really annoying and frustrating because I didn't really know exactly what to do or where it was coming from. I mean, I kind of had an idea. It was probably because I was doing 30-mile days, like at a pretty fast moving pace too, and not taking a lot of breaks throughout the day, and just like not taking enough zeros throughout that stretch while I was having the pain. But I was just really stubborn and I didn't want to take it slower. For me at the time, going slower meant having to carry more days worth of food in the back of your pack, which meant more weight, which meant in my head more pain at the end of the day. So yeah. So that's when, somewhere in NorCal again, but a little bit higher up at around mile 1400, was when I started feeling the first signs of shin splints. And it was brand new to me because I'd never experienced shin splints before. It was really painful because it would like kind of make my nerves fire up and making it really hard to walk, especially going uphill. I would rely very heavily on my trekking poles to the point where I would have just like raw blisters on my hands. I ended up limping my way down into the next town, which was Shasta, at mile 1500-ish. At this point, I knew that those men's ultras have had about 800 miles in them at that point. So I knew that it was like well past the time that I had to get new shoes and like start worrying about this. But again, you know, I didn't have shoes waiting for me at my house, and honestly was just lazy. And yeah, I didn't really have money. I was actually kind of relying on credit cards the whole time, but I should have never really gambled with that. So yeah, when I got into town, I actually met this woman who offered her house to me and just all her love. But she actually offered to take me to the hospital and get x-rays and really kind of urged me just to rule out any stress fractures. So I ended up going to the hospital, got x-rays, they came back clear, but of course the doctor urged me to immediately get off trail and basically not hike, like, for good. So Shasta was actually a pretty low point for me. It was really where I finally had the realization of what I had put my body through and how I kind of completely disregarded everything that it was trying to tell me. I kind of cried a little bit and just kind of had a moment with like how far I had come, but at the expense of my body and my feet specifically, and how I wasn't paying really any attention to them, and like how that was messed up to them. It was really weird. It was like I was kind of trying to apologize to them. Really weird. But overall, just being in town, I had a lot of healing happen to me mentally and physically. I ended up taking 3 zeros, I think, which is not a lot, but to me at the time it was. I ended up losing my trail family, but at that time it was just like, I need to worry about me and I need to just hike my own hike, like. But yeah, so in that time I actually organized my next shoes, what town they would be shipped to, and all of that. And my feet also stabilized, so I ended up hiking out for the next 100 miles or so to the next town called Etna. Everything went well in that stretch. I did take it very easily the first day, but like immediately jumped into 30s again right after that, which was so stupid. Mistake number 1000 now, but just keeping track. But yeah, I just felt good. I didn't really have any shin splints anymore, so that was good. Just that chronic Achilles pain on my right foot now would come and go. But I got to Etna just fine, and I picked up my new shoes in the mail immediately. So that shoe is actually the Ultra Lone Peak 2.5. It's slightly wider than the Ultra 3.0, and it's got a lot more flexible mesh on the top. But the downside to the shoe was that it did deteriorate here in the top, and the traction here kind of faded away a lot more quickly than the 3.0, and just the pattern itself, it was not as good as the 3.0. Also, a really annoying thing about this shoe that I actually just remembered is the bottom platform. Do you notice how this side here, it like sticks out a lot and this side it doesn't? So I actually had this side trimmed because of that flare out. It was giving me kind of like an instability while hiking on uneven terrain, and it was kind of giving me like irritation on the side of my foot. So once I trimmed that out, it was fine. So yeah, I ended up hiking all the way to Canada with these shoes, which was over 1,000 miles. Again, I just don't learn. But I did end up replacing the insoles somewhere in Washington because I found a brand new pair of Ultra insoles in a hiker box randomly. So thank God for that. But yeah, the you know, chronic, deep, achy Achilles pain on the right foot never really went away through all of Oregon and Washington. I actually even slowed down my miles somewhere in Washington because of all the wildfire issues that we were having and reroute logistical stuff that at the time I figured would be good for my foot. But I think that the issue with the Achilles and just the back of the heel on the right foot had gotten so chronic at that point, unless I really just like got off trail for good, it really wasn't gonna go away. It's so funny because this whole time while hiking, the mindset is like push, push, push. We must get to Canada. We must avoid the snow that comes, you know, the first week of October and stuff. But I get to Canada and we had snowstorms anyway, despite all my efforts to be ahead of it all. All right, wow. So that was a lot, but I really felt like I needed to kind of give you all the details so you can get the full picture. Now, in hindsight, the major lessons that I learned: don't try to push any single pair of shoes for more than 500 miles, just as a rule of thumb. Immediately assess any weird issues or pain related to your body and do what's best for you, even if that means losing trail family, even if it means getting behind a little bit. Lastly, be hyper aware of your stride, because any single little flaw with the way that you walk, aka heel striking, can really be exponentiated on a long through hike, potentially causing some really long-term damage. And also, if you do have an injury with, let's say, one of your feet, be aware of overcompensation with the other side of the foot. You can really gradually mess up your entire like biomechanics and just like walking in general. So, but yeah, now that it's been almost 7 months off trail, it's still really a work in progress for me. I'm still experimenting with different shoes and kind of trying out different options. And recently the shoe that I've really liked, this MERRELL Trail Glove 4. It's kind of like a different version of this, but pretty similar. So this is actually the only shoe on the PCT that cost me the least amount of pain. And I believe it's because they're so minimal that they really do force you to be conscious of your stride and the way that you walk. I just wish that they were a little bit wider like the Ultras, but what are you gonna do? And since I'm here, I might as well tell you guys about some other shoes that I really love, just like in everyday life. These are LEMS Boulder boots, and I've actually been wearing the Boulder boot for a couple years now, but LEMS just recently sent me this boot, and this is actually their vegan option, so that's really cool. The company itself, it's based out of Boulder, Colorado, and I think they're pretty awesome. If you're looking for a really, really wide toe box boot, this is it. I just never have tried them on a really long distance hike, but just everyday stuff and even casual day hiking, they're great. And then another minimal shoe that I really like is this guy. I've been wearing this one for a couple years as well. Probably my favorite shoe, just in general to wear. I just wish that they made a very similar shoe to this, but for hiking. Although this one works really well for hikes, just like really short hikes. I just love the way it looks. I think it's really cute and minimal. You just like slip it on and off. It doesn't have like, you know. Oh, and because it's a boat shoe, the traction here is so amazing. It is meant to be walked on like slippery surfaces, so that's really cool. It's got really good grip on like smooth rocky terrain. And then last but not least, I just love doing this. I could like sleep with these shoes. Okay, well, I'm losing light, but to really just wrap up everything in this video, don't do what I did. Be really conscious of your feet and the way that you walk on trail and off trail. Really listen to your body and don't push it too quick too soon. And lastly, just encourage you guys to take shoes more seriously, not like how I did it. After all, shoes are probably the most important piece of gear that you'll have with you on trail. They will literally get you from point A to point B and C and D and etc. Well, thank you so much for watching. I'll happily answer any questions down below in the comments section. If you got anything from this video, please like and share with anyone who you think might find it helpful too. Subscribe to my channel for more trail, hiking, and backpacking related content. I'd really appreciate it. All right.